Het was niet mijn bedoeling van daar zo een soort torentje te bouwen, zoals men vroeger deed, met nog vele torentjes aan. Alhoewel ze het zo zouden gewild hebben. Maar ik had liever iets dat uit die heuvel eruit steeg eigenlijk. Hè. Trouwens, er was gevraagd om buiten de kapel zelfs een grote plek te hebben, een atrium, zo gezegd, waar de bedevaarders de mis konden volgen buiten. Van daaruit ook dat reizende gestalte, dat atrium voor een groot deel overluifeld. Van daaruit is die vormgeving ontstaan en paste nu, naar mijn gevoel, wonderwel in het landschap. Dus, om het zeer kort te zeggen, de functie dicteert altijd de schoonheidsvorm. Omgekeerd kan ook, maar dan is het aan toeval gelegen. Maar normaal, gelijk bouwkunst, bouwkunde niet kan ontlopen. De grootste artiest die het vak niet kent, kan niks maken. Beton interesseert mij om zijn mogelijkheden. Als je een baksteen bouwt, moet je niet zoeken achter nieuwe bogen, want al de bogen zijn al gemaakt. Vindt nog niemand nog een nieuwe boog. Misschien een spastische boog, dat misschien wel. En met beton kun je een grote uitkraaiing maken. Een voorbeeld daarvan is in Nederland. Die uitkraaiing bepaalt die vormgeving en het karakter van die architectuur. En die is 13,35 meter. Uitkraaiing heeft zij. Dus met baksteen kunnen dat niet. En daarom mijn voorliefde voor beton.
Good evening, everybody. In the name of the single, the Archives Juliaan Lampens and the Flanders Architecture Institute, I warmly welcome you, be it in a virtual way. I apologize for the technical problems and the delay we have with this evening. I'm very happy and proud that tonight we can launch the second edition of the book of Juliaan Lampens. We decided to launch this book in English since we receive many orders and interesting questions from all over the world. What seemed a simple plan in the beginning, namely publishing a second edition of the book Lampens made on his own work in 1991, turned out to be an ambitious project. When Lampens made the book in 1991, his work was unknown abroad, and even in Belgium itself, it was not canonized. This has changed completely. We therefore not only added a text that situates his work in this changed context. We also completed his biography and translated all the text to English and French, including the small and often poetic notes of Lampens that accompanies plans, drawings and pictures. We are convinced that these small notes are essential to the understanding of his work, his worldview, his perspective on the human condition and his engagement with education. This work could not have been possible without the great efforts of Jo van den Bergen and Dieter Lampens on the one hand and the translators Maxime Schoepe and Helene Simpson on the other. To keep the original edition untouched, graphic designer Thomas Lotens developed a separate small booklet with the complete English and French translations of the texts. The graphic design of this autonomous volume interplays with the original, but also distances itself from it. We also made a special limited edition that is accompanied by 4 reproductions of the archive. The standards we wanted to meet were high, and I thank all partners with whom we were able to make this re-edition. The book is for sale in the bookstores and on our website, and until tomorrow night, free shipping is provided to the Netherlands and Belgium. In 1991, when Lampens made the book, the Singel produced an exhibition on his work. And also now, on the occasion of the re-edition, an exhibition is made. It is a smaller one than the one Lampens made in the 90s, but it focuses on the details to understand his work. And due to corona measurements, the exhibition is unfortunately closed and not open tonight, but we will keep you informed on our website and our newsletter, and we try to open it as soon as possible to the public. We made a film, though, with an interview of Jo Taillieu, one of the curators of the exhibition, and tonight's program ends with this film. But first, I would like to talk with Katrien Vandemarliere and with Koen de Keizer on the publication of Lampens. Both of them worked intensively on the first edition of the book in 1991. At my side sits Koen, and Katrien is also taking part of this conversation. She's in her home office. Welcome, both of you. Katrien was the curator of the architectural program and the Singel, and as a young professional, she chooses Lampens to be the first architect she made a monographic exhibition on. And later, she became the founding director of the Flanders Architecture Institute. Until the present day, she is a respected mediator, critic, curator and publisher on architecture in Belgium. And Koen is an architect who worked in Lampens' office at the time of the publication and the exhibition in 1991 in the Singel. He's a practicing architect with over 30 years of experience, and he's also a founding member of the non-profit organization Archives Juliaan Lampens. Koen, I would like to start with actually the opening of the book. So the book starts with Lampens' own house. And actually for me it was striking that at the moment when he wants to publish a monography on his oeuvre, he starts with his house, but there are many houses that he realized before. Yeah. Could you explain a bit why he chose this project to start with?
Yeah, so indeed, but as a matter of fact, and I would like to make a small side jump. He wrote, the first thing you see in the book is an aphorism that he wrote. And I will translate it freely. It's like that. It is important to do sometimes, to do something unimportant sometimes. So it tells a lot about the man. Juliaan Lampens always put the importance of architecture and his work into perspective. So, like you say, before he built his own house, he already built numerous houses in a more traditional style. But in terms of his modern work, the catalogue starts with his own house that he built in 1960 for his family. And that house buries the fundamentals of his later work. And his own house was a declaration of his architectural intentions. And almost all the characteristics and properties that of his later work were there already. And the following decades he developed them further. Mm-hmm. So in the book you can see about his own house. You can see the strong relation he drew with yeah, the relation and the answer to the nature and the landscape, and also the intermediating spaces between inside and outside were very important for him. Also the big gesture and meaning of the roof slab. Yeah, the open plan contrasting in his work. You see also the gargoyle and the central position and yeah, of the fireplace. Yeah, there are a lot of typical things of his work that you already can see there. So he was very influenced by the World Expo in 1958 in Brussels, and it was a revelation for him. Yeah, it formed his ideas like that. Yeah, notwithstanding that his architecture looks very modern, his work is, he mainly built houses. His work is also very autobio. It's a kind of translation of the way of life he remembered as a young child at the farm of his grandparents. And it's a sort of living all together under one roof, even with the animals. So it became an important theme in his work. And also the meaning of a garden that is not really garden for him. It's a domesticated landscape. So yeah, the importance of his own first built house was very big. And you also can see that his own house is very manly in terms of in terms of shape. It's you can compare it the Vandemarliere Kieboom's house that he built, and also with the chapel on the hill of Edelaar. These are very manly gestures. In the meaning of orthogonal and very angular. And then later on in the 70s and 80s, he worked. His work evolves in more feminine shapes or curved shapes. So yeah, you can see it in the book. You can discover, for instance, the tourist office in Blankenberge. You have also the National Peasants' War Museum. We can show some picture of that. And but almost from the beginning, this feminine, the curve was always present in his work. Yeah, he in his free drawings and in his sketches. So it was not new for him. Yeah, also in his utopian architecture, and yeah, you can discover it in the book. So it would be very interesting research to compare his free work with his architecture. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to add that to him, I think his own house was his first manifesto on his thinking about how family that days should live. And it was also a kind of turning point where he could find new clients. So for him, he never had a showcase where he could prove what he was really thinking. And his own house was the key project to have this turning point in his career. And I think that is also what he meant by having that book as a starting point for his true ambitions in architecture. I think it's important to see it also in that way.
Mm-hmm. And Katrien, so you as a young curator, you choose to program on Juliaan Lampens. But maybe it's interesting for the audience that you explain in a bit the context in which you were making this book. Actually, the architectural scene that is now here in Flanders and in Belgium is not the same as it was in the beginning of the 90s. And it's also interesting to position Juliaan in that context.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Belgium at that time there were absolutely not a lot of publications on architecture, and not a lot was really. There were one or two publications a year maybe, and there were only a few critiques in Belgium. What was very influential was the magazine at that time, Wonen THBK. So there was critique, and there was a consciousness of contemporary architecture, but the situation in Belgium was very different because it was mostly the professionals with the order of architects who had spokesmen, but it was never about quality in architecture, or it was never about the craftsmanship or the ways people design and why they design. So making book or starting making a book or a monography on an architect was really inventing how to communicate. What is the story about? How we're going to give a certain critique and whom we are asking for making text, because there was really not such a culture on architecture, nor there were magazines with glossy photographs. It was really all on a very low profile. So we really had to start from scratch, and luckily Juliaan had a very specific idea on what the book should be, and he was making books all the time in a kind of old-fashioned clusters. He was putting things together, so he had already the habit of making a kind of flow of ideas. So in fact, we really got a very good model, a mock-up he made, and it was very simple and very, it was just some flyers in plastic folders, and very hands-on. There were some specific ideas that were very clear, and I found it back in my archives in the Single. I'm one of the lucky ones who has an archive and who's still living. But anyway, I will quote it very quickly, what this note is saying, and I hope the public can see the book itself. So you will, it's amazing. So what my little note was saying, it's keywords for the book. It is a book to look at, with a lot of white and very much empty space. It should show the daily practice of an architect. So he means with drawings, with sketches and little texts, with details of architecture and plans. There should be one image per page. The images should be annotated. The format is horizontal, A4 oblong. The paper should have optimal quality and texture for having duotone prints. The cover is cardboard or maybe linen, grey or beige. The jacket of the cover, or on the cover, there should be the stamp of the office and the signature of Juliaan Lampens. There need to be drawings and free work of himself in the book. All is black and white. 128 pages. So, I mean, it was so clear in his head. So that was the easy part. The difficult part was to make it, and to make it in time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we had to choose between an extended version of the book with numerous drawings and photos, sketches, etc., but in black and white then. Or a modest, more concise version in color. Mm-hmm. So color is very important in the work of Juliaan. and in his sketches, his drawings, but he made the choice to show as much as possible material, and it was almost in a didactic, for didactic reasons, for his students almost. So also the existing photo material in this time was mostly black and white, and it was not strange at all in that time to make black and white publications. And I remember that the single made some extra budget available for a binding of the book in linen. It was referring to the first generation of modernists who published their oeuvre on the same way. I have one here, like Le Corbusier, also Neutra and Breuer. It was a kind of a quality to make books like that. So yeah. It was a wink to these first modernists.
So the meaning of the material choices are very important, and we also re-editing the book, we were really aware of the importance of the materiality, and I'm going to tell a small anecdotal history about the paper we choose, because at the time when you made the book with Juliaan, this paper was a very regular kind of paper, but it turned out that it didn't exist anymore. And we were looking for other kinds of paper, but as the materiality is so important in his build work, it became similarly important in the book. We thought it was very difficult, not when re-editing the book, not finding this paper. In the end, we found a paper making company in Germany who remade this kind of paper. Because the symbolic behind all the choices of Juliaan are so important that we could not deviate from this. And also, as you say, the references to architectural history and how he positions himself there is very very interesting. And that's actually a question for you, Koen. So in my reading of the book and how I look at it, it's not a reflection on his oeuvre, on his work. It's not something that he adds. It's actually part of it.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Yeah, it's a part of his oeuvre. So the form of the book is a mix of architectural drawings. It's a mix of ground plans, sections, details, but also architectural utopias, notes, texts, aphorisms, plastical work. It is all brought together in an associated manner. And it was a way how Juliaan Lampens worked his whole life. There was no division between his work and his life and the way he did things, the way he created things. It was one gesture. So his free work, his texts, his utopias are part of his architecture, and actually they can only be seen or read like that. You cannot separate these things. His plastical work and his architecture is one team. So sometimes collaborators that worked in the office of Juliaan Lampens got complete booklets like the book, the re-edition, with sketches and drawings and texts, and it was fantastic. Lampens made these booklets completely himself. Everything. So this way, the book reflects his practice in which life, working, education, art, nature is very strongly interwoven.
Katrien, so bringing it to the exhibition, was there a similar idea behind the exhibition? What was the scenography? What was the story there? Was it was it similar to the book, or did he want to tell a different story there?
Well, it's a bit the same. In the 90s, there was only the starting point of making exhibitions. So the one-to-one sculptural installations that tell about the oeuvre that didn't exist yet, or we didn't made it anyway, and the budget was not available for that. So what is important to know is that the moment I invited Juliaan Lampens was at the end of his career as a teacher, as a professor at St. Lucas. So his former interns and the assistants of his school and his lessons, they decided to give him a present, and the present was that they would make models of the key works he had built, and that coincided very well with my question to have an exhibition at that time. So I worked together with 28 of the interns, older interns and assistants of Juliaan, and they all made a model in 4X. So that was the basic piece of the exhibition. We choose to make this in a format, white abstract models. That was one starting point, and then for the rest, it was the main ideas that were in the book. There should be free work, and that was put on the ramp on the walls, and the drawings were put on tables like it is in the atelier, in the office, in an architecture office. And yeah, we just worked with simple, plain things. We had frames in natural wood. That was perfect because all his furniture is in natural plywood, and you know, it was very plain, natural, authentic. The only installation he made one-to-one was a small stairs. We will see the picture or the image. Were small stairs and a kind of installation to look at dias, the carousel of dias that were shown. So that was it. It was very, and yeah, people don't know the plan of the single, but it is a public art center with and the exhibition hall is a big ramp and a long corridor of 80 meters. So it was very plain and normal, as I said.
And Katrien, when you before we're talking about the architectural scene in Belgium at the time, when you chose Lampens to have an exhibition in the single, you were a very young curator at the time. Do you remember, or can you explain us what your intentions were with choosing him?
Well, I at that time, let's say I was as a young student and as worked in public programs for architecture, I was so convinced that Lampens was so important to show to people because to me it is a very personal story also. I was so struck by his buildings as a young person. When I was still a student, I had a friend who lived in a house of Juliaan Lampens, and for me it was so a decisive personal moment in the sense that I decided that I wanted to be busy with architecture and know all about it. But what struck me so hard, it was to me, who lived in a typical Gaston Bachelard house with cellars and the first floor, and then the piano nobile and the attics and the stories around the house. The houses of Lampens were so different, and the life of the people in it was so authentic, free. There was nothing superficial. It was so natural to me that this was something I was very easy to communicate on to the public, to explain what is the essence of architecture. To me, it was in a certain way a very communicative architecture. It is very radical, but you can explain the basics on architecture. You can explain this very well. On the other hand, I knew very well it was really an architect's architecture, because it was so authentic and truthful to modernist ideas like Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe, because he was mixed of both of them. I knew it was also very intriguing to architects. So yeah, what was it? It was in a kind, personal and brutal and naive to think, well, we just do it. And we had the lucky coincidences that curators sometimes have. If you're very passionate and very busy with your profession, you have lucky shots also. It just comes like that there were, yeah, it was the right time or the right decision at the right moment, also for Juliaan, and that's why the intensity was so big also, I think, because he was ready for it, and the people around him too, and the school, and so yeah, things consigned like that, I think.
Already mentioned it. It was in a way also a brave choice, because Lampens was not a canonic figure at the time. And in the introduction of the book of 1991, Paul Vermeulen, who was invited to write an introduction, states that there is something about Lampens' work that kept the architectural critical voices and press silent about it. And it's actually a question for both of you. Maybe Koen, you can answer first. How would you explain this, or how do you see this?
So I think in that time his work was not well understood, and for more than one reason. I think it at the outside, for instance, it was very fairly hermetic, his work, both in terms of form as his use of material. So he fastly got the label of brutalist. And also his work was on the one side very international and modern, modernist, and on the other side it was very local, very grounded, like he was himself. And it's his own. It's not copyable. It's pure Juliaan Lampens, and I think that's an important reason why a lot of people couldn't understand his work. But yeah, for those who know his work, they know that it has a very sensitive and warm side also, his work. Yeah, I can explain, but...
Yeah. And regarding architectural critique, so Katrien, when you were making the book, you invited Paul Vermeulen, but also a client was invited.
Yeah, I think, well, making an architecture book is also thinking about how are we going to communicate, and what is the message, and what is the spectacles with what you are looking at, the material. So Gerard van den Houten was a man of the words. I mean, he could speak very well, and he could write very well, and there was a very I think the text Gerard wrote was really the proof of a kind of very, very deep understanding, friendship, and very deep understanding of what Lampens had in his mind. He was not a man of a lot of words on architecture, in the sense that he was the promoter of his own work. He was having ideas, and he was speaking about architecture, but also with jokes, and it was not so clear. But he was not eloquent in the way he was speaking about his own work. So Gerard was that. And I think I remember Juliaan was very touched by his text, and he was very pleased by it. The text of Paul, I don't remember very well what he was thinking about it. I was very pleased with the text of Paul, because I think he's one of the rare critiques who can combine context of the work with a portrait of the architect, a personal portrait of the person, and also can describe some projects in which he can find a few red lines that become typical characteristics of the work. So to me, Paul was very young at that moment, but he really made a very good introduction, I find, on the work. But that was one of the trials also in making the book. Whom is going to speak and why? Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your reflections so generously with us. As I told, normally this room would be filled with people. Now we are sitting here alone with a closed exhibition next to us. But we are optimistic. People can see an image of the exhibition now. So we are optimistic and we are trying to keep the exhibition longer open as soon as the government lets us. But we also went to the Van Wassenhove house with Jo Taillieu, one of the curators of the exhibition. And to conclude this evening, we are going to watch Jo explaining the intentions of the curators on this exhibition.
Het unieke uiveren van Juliaan Lampens inspireert verschillende generaties architecten, tot ver buiten onze landsgrenzen. De fascinatie van Lampens voor het architectuurdetail en zijn zoektocht naar puurheid van materiaal en afwerking spreken nog steeds tot de verbeelding. Het Vlaams Architectuurinstituut brengt in de vorm van een tentoonstelling en een boek een eerbetoon aan deze bijzondere architect.
Ik heb het werk van Juliaan Lampens leren kennen in 1992. Als tweedejaars architectuurstudent had ik het geluk om de tentoonstelling van Juliaan Lampens in de Singel te kunnen bekijken op aanraden van mijn docenten. Was ik de aftocht vanuit Wevelgem naar Antwerpen gemaakt om daar in 1992 die fantastische tentoonstelling te zien. Voor mij was dat een hele wereld die zich opende, niet alleen op architecturaal vlak, maar ook hoe dat die tekeningen, die maquettes, was een fantastisch gegeven. Ik weet ook nog dat dat een van mijn eerste architectuurboeken was dat ik toen gekocht heb. Ik weet nog heel goed en ik denk dat moet rond het jaar 2000 geweest zijn, dat we met een aantal vrienden samen de zondagnamiddag het plan opgevat hadden om in een regenachtige dag toch een aantal projecten van Juliaan Lampens te gaan bezoeken. De kapel hebben we toen bezocht en we waren ook onze stoute schoenen aangetrokken om gewoon aan te bellen in de woning van Wassenhove, waar dat we vandaag zitten. Even ding-dong, gewoon met de ambitie, we willen het toch ooit gezien hebben. En dan kwamen we eigenlijk in de woning. Het was slecht weer, dus helemaal niet de ideale context. De woning was in zijn volle beleving van bewoning, zou je kunnen stellen. Dus dat betekent dat eigenlijk de bewoner het huis overnam. Maar het fantastische van dat gegeven is ook dat die woning dat perfect aan kan. Ik had helemaal niet het gevoel dat daar iets mee misliep. Dus dat kan alleen maar betekenen dat die architectuur dit aan kan en dat die architectuur dit toelaat en zelfs ook wel wil toelaten. Wat dan misschien mogelijk wel soms een keer een misvatting van de architectuur van Juliaan Lampens zou kunnen zijn, dat het objectmatig is, maar in mijn inziens heeft dat niets met een objectmatigheid te maken, niets met de celebratie te maken.
Aanneemt gaat over wat hoe wat.
Prachtig. Die relatie binnen buiten is formidabel. Hè?
Ja. Ik denk dat het werk van Juliaan Lampens in een architectuurgeschiedenis een eigen plaats inneemt. Een eigen plaats in de zin dat het een heel persoonlijk werk is. Dat het zou kunnen een mislezing krijgen vanuit een soort van hoek die men algemeen het minimalisme zou gaan noemen. Ik denk dat het helemaal daar niks mee te maken heeft. Het heeft te maken met die directheid van een architectuur. Het fijne van de woning van Wassenhove is die directheid met binnen en buiten, maar dan toch wel weer door de positionering van de deur die net achter mij staat, tonen dat er een grens is tussen binnen en buiten. En dat is het fantastische van die architectuur en dat is het bijzondere van die architectuur. En in die zin zou je kunnen stellen dat het eerder bij modernisme aansluit. En als we dan durven denken aan een archituur van Le Corbusier of dan zou je daar associaties kunnen in vinden, maar dan niet vanuit het materiaal, maar vanuit de visie van op de architectuur. Voor de tentoonstelling hebben we de link naar het detail hebben we gelegd met het project in Blankenberge, onthaalcentrum voor toeristen. Een ontwerp die niet gerealiseerd was, maar die effectief wel tot een ontwikkeling gekomen was dat het à la minuut als het ware kon gebouwd worden. Met andere woorden, elk detail van het volledige project is uitgetekend, is gemaakt geweest, stond klaar om gebouwd te worden. Het project is gekozen omdat het enerzijds een project is die door het feit dat het nooit gebouwd is ook zijn plaats enkel in het publicatie en een publicatie heeft kunnen vinden, maar die nooit in een soort van andere context zichtbaar gemaakt is. De woningen zijn heel vaak belicht in tentoonstellingen. De woningen zijn ook maar een gedeelte van het oeuvre van Juliaan Lampens. Het is ook fijn om eigenlijk de schaalsprong of aan te tonen dat de schaalsprong van een woning naar een veel groter project ook een evidentie is in het werk van Juliaan Lampens. Het zou kunnen een misvatting zijn dat het gaat over alleen maar het maken van woningen. Het is een architectuur die niet aan de schaal gebonden is. Het is een architectuur die aan een wijze van kijken gebonden is. Met andere woorden, het dergelijk project die we in het archief vonden van Blankenberge staat voor dezelfde attitude van architectuur. Het architectuurdetail neemt een fundamentele plaats in het werk van Juliaan Lampens. Het is een architectuur die ontzettend belang hecht aan elke schaal, elke stap in de schalen van de architectuur. En dat betekent ook dat het detail even belangrijk is als de totaliteit. Niet als een fetish-element, niet als een soort van doorgepuurd element, maar als een element die een ondersteuning geeft aan het geheel. En vandaar dat we eigenlijk de stap gemaakt hebben om die 1-op-2 details vaak getekend, die hebben we als tentoonstellingsobject genomen om de tentoonstelling te maken. Waarom? Omdat je eigenlijk daar de hand voelt van het denkend tekenen. Het maken van dat detail en door de grote schaal voel je de kracht van dat materiaal. Voel je de werking van dat detail in zijn geheel. De traagheid van het tekenen met de hand en de voeling dat die proportie, die echte werkelijkheid kent, wat dat in een digitale wereld niet aanwezig is, maar in een analoge wereld wel, maakt dat je dat detail lijfelijk als het ware voelt. Het is ook een woning waarin iedere keer dat je opnieuw komt, dat je nieuwe dingen ziet.
Ja, dat is juist. Een andere benadering. Ga maar.
De veilige eigenschap vind ik van goede architectuur,
Ja.
dat je hem niet laat lezen in één keer.
Mm-hmm.
Ik zie ontzettend veel plezier in het bedenken van details. En plezier in het maken van een detail. Niet naar het zoeken van het oplossen van het probleem, maar naar het zoeken van hoe kan ik hier nu omgaan met elementen. Hoe kan ik omgaan met dat binnen-buiten. Hoe kan ik een hoek omplooien. En daar zit gewoon een plezier in. En dat plezier komt terecht uit die tekeningen op u af. We hebben eigenlijk dat plezier ook gedeeld in het maken van de tentoonstelling. Hoe dat we die zaterdagen doorgebracht hebben en we hebben dat plezier gedeeld. Ik vind dat heel belangrijk omdat dat ook zo ontstaan is. En we hebben dat eigenlijk verder gezet.
I would like to end this Booklaunch event by expressing my gratitude to the VZ2 Juliaan Lampens and the curators of the exhibition, Jo van den Berge, Luc de Vos, Koen de Keizer, Frank Velge, Dieter Lampens, Daan Dufay en Jo Taillieu. Eva Wijns and Nino Gooivaerts of the Flanders Architecture Institute and the team of the single made the exhibition possible. Ilse Degeriks and Eva Pot worked on the book, and they were all supported by many people of the team of the single and the Flanders Architecture Institute. Thanks to all of them. I would like to especially express my gratitude to Dieter Lampens for giving the Flanders Architecture Institute the possibility to undertake this exciting journey. Without your passion and engagement, none of this would have been possible. The plans for the re-edition of the book were made while Juliaan Lampens and his beloved wife, Diane Vanhove, were still amongst us. They unfortunately passed away last year and could not see the results of the efforts made to disseminate his work. And in my last words of tonight, I would like to express the hope that the re-edition of the book and the exhibition are a tribute to Juliaan and his wife. To all of you at home following this event, thank you very much for being with us. I hope you enjoyed it. The book and the special edition are for sale on our website and in bookstores. And we hope, as I said, to soon reopen the exhibition. Please follow us on our website and the newsletter. I also like to invite you for upcoming events of the Flanders Architecture Institute. They should be on slide right now. Thank you very much. Have a good evening and stay safe.